that in the first Nicene Creed, Holy Spirit, the sentence about Holy Spirit was very short, no? And you often identify that there has to be a rediscovery of Holy Spirit that has to constantly happen. And especially in your work, I remember reading that you echo the simile of Holy Spirit as the Cinderella who has joined the theological ball on a later phase. And do you think that is a very constant thing with the church, that we have to always bring Holy Spirit back into conversation?
In the context of the Nicene Creed, the reason why the Holy Spirit is sort of left out was not really because of a latent entry of the Holy Spirit, as in the Cinderella thing, which is a phrase that Lister McGrath uses, especially in the context of how the focus on the Spirit was sort of absent in throughout a long period of time before it somewhat reappearing in the early 20th century. And so there is that gap that we see, and then which is sort of addressed by the rise of Pentecostalism and charismatic churches on the one hand, and also the focus within theological circles on pneumatology on the other. So that sort of is where the phrase comes from. But in the Nicene context, the question that was in debate was the deity of Christ. And so they began to address that. Now 325 AD, as David has already mentioned, the focus was Arius and Athanasius. And so that was the main debate. The issue of the deity of the Spirit was not as much of an issue, although we see a little bit of that with the pneumatomachieans coming in later on, where the divinity of the Spirit again is sort of questioned in ranking the Spirit lower. So the entire so if you were to sort of connect all the theological problems that exist, then it would be we can draw a parallel from where the complication in theological debate happened. The influence of Neoplatonism is basically where the problem occurs. Neoplatonism looked at the God as the one, one with a capital O, and then the Word and Logos was in hierarchy placed underneath. And then the world and the world spirit was placed underneath that. So the Word becomes the means through which the demiurge, through which God creates the world. And the world occupies the lowest rung of the society. And so the influence of Neoplatonism then basically rank orders the Father, and Son is equated with the Logos, who is the medium, who creates the world spirit, or the soul of the world, which is the Spirit. So in that sense, the Spirit occupied a further lower rung. And so that is again addressed in 381, but we notice that is that was not so much of an issue as we think of the debate about the deity of Christ, because the deity of Christ was a bit more serious, because the deity of the Spirit was it never came into a very serious kind of a trouble. The Old Testament, of course, the Spirit is associated with the Spirit of Yahweh, who does his work and comes back to Yahweh. But then we notice that in studying through the Gospels, we see that Spirit is present in the conception of Jesus, and at the ministry of Jesus, the Spirit appears. And so later on, we have a very strong, robust understanding of the Spirit, with the Pentecost, in some sense, forming the backbone of the experiential aspect of all the disciples. And for the disciples who began to make sense of all of these things, a good place to go for us would be the Gospel of John, where Philip is asking Jesus the question, "Show us the Father," and Jesus says, "Well, if you've seen me, you've seen the face of the Father." And then Jesus is actually introducing the idea that he is now not going to be there with them anymore. He's going to go back to the Father. But he says that he will pray to the Father in chapter 14 of John. He will pray the Father, and I will pray the Father, and he will send you another counselor to be with you forever. So here is the connection that disciples are, the early apostles, in and through the teaching of Jesus, are making with regard to the continuity of the work of Jesus by the Spirit, beginning with Pentecost. So that the full picture for the disciples comes into action very experientially on the day of Pentecost.